my life. I didn't even feel like playing dead. By the end of that session, we determined that my major issue was that I felt that I didn't deserve to be famous. Bullshit, you do deserve it, Dr. Casriel told me. And eventually you're going to scream, I deserve to be famous to me. He had me attend a group session a few days later. There were 6 people to a group, and each of us would sit on a mat with Dr. Casriel in the center of the circle. After a few minutes, I realized that next to these other people, my problem seemed a little puny. One guy believed that he had a hole in his head. The woman next to me was one of the most beautiful women I had ever seen, a 15 on a scale of 1 to 10. You couldn't keep your eyes off her, but she thought she was ugly. There was a pilot who had a problem with flight. Each patient would get a personalized mantra from Dr. Casriel. The woman's was I am gorgeous. I have everything going for me. And he would make you repeat it over and over again, louder and louder. My mantra was I do deserve to be famous. I do deserve to be a winner. He had me screaming that over and over, louder and louder, until it was almost like an out-of-body experience or an exorcism. I was rolling around on the ground, tears coming out of my eyes, screaming, I do deserve to be famous. And thanks to my singing, I knew how to scream. I could shatter glass with my screaming. So all the other people were hugging me and consoling me and saying, you do deserve to be famous. When that session was over, I felt rewarded. After a few more sessions, I had never felt more relaxed. The stress was gone. No more panic attacks. I had even cleaned up and stopped doing coke and drinking. I felt that Peter Criscuola had re-emerged and that lunatic Catman had receded into the background. New Year's Eve 1976 was a good measure of our dizzying success. 3 years earlier, we had opened for Blue Oyster Cult and played to 3,500 people. Now Blue Oyster Cult was opening for us and we had sold out the Nassau Coliseum, all 13,000 plus seats. When we went on stage, we were treated like conquering heroes. Backstage there were people who wanted to have their picture taken with me, have me kiss their babies. It was frightening to have all these people touching me and grabbing at me. One girl pulled my brother and me aside and pulled up her dress to show us a huge KISS logo tattooed on her ass. If I wanted to, I could have gotten blowjobs on stage, off stage, in, between stage, backstage, under the stage. It was wild. On stage, we always felt as if we were looking into some bizarre mirror. Thousands of people in the audience were wearing our makeup. We were on the front covers of all the big industry magazines, Cashbox, Record World, Billboard. Ironically, the one thing that really bugged us was that off stage we would never be recognized without our makeup on. Bill would always lecture us, don't ever get caught without your makeup. When you're out, wear big dark glasses that look mysterious. At first that was fun, but after a while it began to bother us. I remember walking into the China Club in New York City one night and telling the host I was Peter Criss from KISS. Yeah, and I'm fucking Mick Jagger, he said, and turned away. I had to take out my license and show it to him before I could get a table. I couldn't believe that we'd finish a huge tour, the world would go crazy, and then we'd go home and walk the streets of New York and no one would recognize me. After Destroyer came out, I slipped and fell back into doing cocaine again. It would be glib to say that after working with Gene and Paul, anybody could become a drug addict. The truth was coke was everywhere. The promoters would always have some for you. The radio station guys would turn you on. Back at the office, Bill was doing it. I'd go to Studio 54 and I'd sit with Alston and Liza Minnelli and Bianca Jagger and Steve Rubel, and everyone was doing blow. when we'd be in El Dade. Ace and I would get a hospitality gift from Casablanca sent to our rooms. It would contain a basket of fruit, an incredibly good bottle of wine, a couple of grams of coke, and some quaaludes along with a card reading, "Welcome to El Dade. Love you, Neil." Casablanca Records. We'd go out to El Dome, and half the staff at Casablanca would pull out their little bottles with the spoon on a chain. If you got a job at Casablanca, you'd immediately get a Mercedes, and every afternoon a guy would go door to door and take orders for coke and quaaludes, which were put on your expense account. It was insane. We were too naive to understand the dangers of coke. We figured that if a genius like Ezrin could do it and still produce critically acclaimed platinum albums, what was the downside? The party scene in New York was just as crazy. There were great clubs like Drax, JP's, and Ashley's. I would frequent Plato's Retreat a lot because it was a sex club that had terrific orgies. My favorite place was Studio 54. Where else could a kid from Brooklyn hang out with Warhol and Truman Capote? I would go upstairs onto the balcony and lean over with a drink in one hand while a broad was sucking my cock. Later I'd go downstairs and screw a model in one of the bathrooms. Even my role model Bill Rahway wasn't strong enough to resist the temptations of wealth. As we got richer, he got crazier and crazier. He had a beautiful pad in Olympic Towers, one of the ritziest buildings in the city. He began to throw coke-fueled parties where he'd surround himself with nuble young boys, and his apartment turned into Dante's Inferno. I remember many nights of partying at Bill's when it would get to be around 6 in the morning and you'd get that electric feeling from doing too much blow, and the sun was coming up and you'd open the drapes and see the huge 666 sign on the neighboring building on 5th Avenue. That was a wake-up call right there. Slowly but surely, I became addicted to cocaine. I got crazier and crazier. I capitalized on the fact that I was in the hottest band in the world and I could get away with anything. I acted out, in part, because I was beginning to feel so alienated from Gene and Paul that I just didn't want to be around them anymore. The joy of making music with them was gone. There was always a lag between our successes and the fruits of those successes. The money was going to come to us, but it hadn't come in vast quantities yet. So I began to deal coke to our crew. I'd cop a quarter of an ounce from Bob Ezrin's dealer and then Lydia would cut it with baby laxative and sell it as grams. Bill and Sean would score from us. On the road, I was supplying all the roadies and our truck drivers. Gene and Paul never knew this or they would have gone crazy. But it was hard to miss. The crew would literally be lined up in front of my hotel room door after a show. I charged them $60 a gram, which was a reasonable price, and that way Lydia and I got to snort coke for free. But after a couple of months dealing coke, it got too risky. All of a sudden I was getting knocks at my hotel room door at 5 in the morning. "Get the fuck out of here," I'd scream, and throw a shoe at the door. I figured that sooner or later I'd get busted. But just because I stopped dealing didn't mean I stopped using. I was born hyper. I'd been on medication since I was a kid to keep me calm. So imagine what I was like on blow. Like all coke addicts, I could never have enough. I would stay up for days on end. One time I stayed up for 7 straight days. Eventually I started hallucinating. I thought the police were surrounding our brownstone, so I got my gun and made a barricade by the upstairs window. Lydia called Sean, and he rushed over with a handful of lewds. He promised that if I took them he would come back later that night with some really good blow, so I downed him and went to sleep. Around this time I befriended somebody who could snort me under the table. John Belushi was one of the biggest comedy stars at that time. We met at JP's and hit it off immediately. He was a huge Kiss fan. After we hung out a while, John did a skit on Saturday Night Live in which he played a backstage bouncer who wouldn't let people in to see us. John wanted me to come on the show to do a cameo, but Bill didn't think it would be such a good idea to do it without the band, so it never happened. I think one of the reasons John loved hanging out with me was because he wanted to be a rock star. We met right before he did the Blues Brothers with Dan Aykroyd. When they performed a live show at Radio City as the Blues Brothers, John invited me down. They were so happy to be up there singing the blues with real players like Duck Dunn. John felt he had been a clown like cliché on Saturday Night Live. Music really spoke much more to his soul. One of the first times we hung together was at a Saturday Night Live after party the week the Stones were on the show. They hosted it at an old bar that John and Dan had bought for their private use. When I got there, we immediately went to the bathroom and did some coke. John's energy was so overwhelming, he lured me right into his insanity. Even the way he did blow was special. He had no time for tiny vials or little coke spoons. He carried a baggie full of coke, and he would scoop some up in his palm and literally shove it up your nose. We had a great time that night. He introduced me to Steve Martin, who was an